Berlin, April 30th, 1945. The once mighty capital of Nazi Germany was now nothing more than a graveyard of fire and dust. Buildings that once echoed with the sound of marching soldiers were now reduced to rubble. The air was filled with smoke, fear, and the faint cries of a dying empire. Deep beneath the city, hidden behind layers of concrete and steel, one man sat in silence: Adolf Hitler. The man who had once promised to build a 1,000-year empire was now counting his final hours. Above him, his world was collapsing. And below, inside his bunker, he was preparing to meet the only thing left waiting for him: death. For years, Hitler had ruled through terror. His words had once hypnotized millions. But by the spring of 1945, his voice no longer commanded nations. It echoed only within the cold walls of his bunker. The Allied forces were closing in from all sides. The British and Americans had taken the West, while the Soviet army was only a few streets away from the Reich Chancellery. The empire he had built through lies, fear, and blood was now being erased by the very war he started. The Führerbunker, buried 30 feet underground, was his last refuge. It was dark, cramped, and filled with the smell of damp concrete and cigarette smoke. Around him were the final loyal few: his generals, secretaries, his trusted minister Goebbels, and his companion Eva Braun. Outside, bombs exploded endlessly. The bunker shook, dust fell from the ceiling, and yet Hitler refused to leave. He still believed in a miracle that would never come. He would sit for hours, staring at maps that no longer meant anything, moving imaginary divisions of soldiers that no longer existed. He screamed at his officers, accusing them of betrayal. But everyone around him knew the truth. Germany had already fallen. Hitler was living in a fantasy, clinging to power that had already slipped through his hands. Physically, he was unrecognizable. His once powerful posture had vanished. His hands trembled. His body was weak. Witnesses described him as a shadow of the man who once shook the world. His health had deteriorated. His speech had slowed, and his eyes seemed lost, empty, as if already dead inside. But even in his final hours, his pride remained untouched. He refused to surrender. He refused to be captured alive. In his mind, surrender was worse than death. On the night of April 29th, 1945, Hitler did something unexpected. He married Eva Braun, the woman who had stayed by his side for over a decade. It was a short, quiet ceremony held inside the bunker. Witnesses say Eva was calm, almost peaceful, as if she had already accepted what was coming. They celebrated with champagne that no one really tasted. There was no joy left, only the emptiness of knowing that the end was near. Later that same night, Hitler dictated his final will and political testament. In it, he blamed everyone but himself for Germany's destruction. He accused his generals of betrayal and his people of weakness. He refused to admit defeat. In his final lines, he wrote that he would rather die than face capture. He signed it calmly and handed it over to his aides. He had made his decision. The next morning, Hitler tested the cyanide capsules on his beloved dog, Blondie. The animal died instantly. Witnesses said Hitler was deeply shaken, yet it confirmed what he needed to know. The poison worked. The man who once caused the deaths of millions was now testing death on his only loyal companion. By afternoon, the Soviet army was only a few hundred meters away. The bunker trembled under constant shelling. Hitler knew there was no escape. He had already ordered his staff to burn his body after death, to prevent it from being displayed like Mussolini's. He did not want the world to see him as a defeated man. Around 3:30 p.m., Hitler and Eva Braun retreated to their private room. They exchanged a few quiet words. No one knows exactly what was said. Moments later, a gunshot echoed through the bunker. When the door was opened, Hitler was found lifeless, a pistol in his hand. Eva lay beside him, having swallowed poison. The two bodies were wrapped in blankets, carried to the small garden outside the bunker, and burned using petrol. The flames rose weakly under the falling rain, turning history into ashes. Those who witnessed it said nothing. There were no tears, no words, just silence. The war that began with Hitler's voice ended in absolute quiet. As news of his death spread, chaos erupted across Berlin. Some officers tried to flee. Others took their own lives. Goebbels poisoned his 6 children before killing himself and his wife. The entire Nazi leadership collapsed like a house of cards. On May 6, 1945, Berlin officially surrendered. Within a week, the war in Europe was over. The dictator who dreamed of ruling the world had been reduced to ashes in a garden behind a bunker. For years, conspiracy theories spread. Some believed Hitler escaped to Argentina or Antarctica. But evidence recovered by the Soviets, including fragments of his skull and dental remains, confirmed what most historians accept today. Adolf Hitler died on April 30th, 1945, by his own hand. And yet, even after his death, his shadow haunted the world. His ideology, his hatred, and the scars he left behind could not be buried as easily as his body. Entire nations were rebuilt from the ruins he left. Millions of lives were forever changed by the decisions of one man. The story of Hitler's final day is not just about his death. It is about the fall of arrogance, the collapse of blind power, and the truth that no tyrant escapes justice forever. In the end, Hitler's empire of hate turned against him. His dream of domination ended with isolation. His war for glory ended in shame. And the man who demanded absolute loyalty from others could not remain loyal even to himself. Power built on fear never lasts. Histo.